Last week at the Steam Game Festival, I had the opportunity to play a certain demo, Foregone. Now, Foregone, for those of us who don't know, is a 2D action platformer slash shooter. It's a beautifully rendered game, very incredible story to it, very intriguing gameplay, and something that I would definitely recommend everyone who has a chance play. However, recently I had the chance to sit down with one of the game designers behind the title and talk about a lot of the different things that went into it and a lot of the different things behind it. It was a great conversation. We covered a lot of very intriguing things. So without further ado, it's time to get into that interview.
Tell me about the story. I mean, characters, everything, the world that the game takes place in, the inspiration behind it. Just kind of talk to me about everything that went into that.
So Foregone kind of has players take control of a super soldier, which we refer to as arbiters in the world. She's been sent to investigate a city that's been infected by a corruption called the Harrow. When you're there, you kind of quickly realize that some monstrous enemies have been revived by this corruption. The investigation you've been sent on doesn't quite go as planned, and then it's kind of up to you to unravel the story from there. We went relatively light on any forced story content, so it's kind of like there for players that want to enjoy gameplay. They can just do that instead of diving deeper into any of the story stuff. But there's also plenty of collectibles and things that you can acquire that'll kind of help you unravel more of the game world if you're interested in that part of it.
Okay, so it really focuses on the gameplay and kind of makes the story an optional aspect of it in a way.
Yeah, there's a couple of forced sections where we do want you to kind of experience some plot reveals, but we don't force you to sit through a lot of cinematics or anything like that.
And the game is really reminiscent of a lot of the older Nintendo titles and just like the retro style, the kind of pixelated version of how you play through it. What drew you to that specifically? I mean, were there any games that really kind of popped out that you drew inspiration from, or was it what kind of fit that style to this game?
Right. I think a lot of us kind of grew up, at least a lot of the team grew up during the Nintendo and Super Nintendo. So when we learned that we were working on a platformer, it was almost kind of a no-brainer to go for the pixelated art style. For me personally, I think it was Mega Man X had a huge inspiration on me growing up. And there's some remnants of that in this game. You do get an air dash at some point, and that's very similar to Mega Man X2. There's a wall climb that similarly feels to the Mega Man X wall climb. Not quite, but it's a little bit there, a bit of that coming through.
So it's bringing back all the old school games, kind of just putting a part of yourself in the title, basically.
Yeah.
I like that. That's cool. Okay. And then just kind of different weapons, loot, gear. As players go through it, I played the demo and I noticed like you can pick up a lot of different things as you play. And there is a part of the game where you can craft different things from what I saw. So just kind of talk to me about the different weapon craftings and character upgrades within the story.
Right. So we try to give you plenty of options when it came to upgrading your character. Every piece of equipment that drops has a set of randomized modifiers that can affect your playstyle, from something as simple as dealing more damage or completely changing the way that one of your skills works. And then in addition to that, we have two skill tree systems. One is kind of strictly for strong passive effects, and these will just be things that affect you as you play the game. They'll amazingly come to fruition as you invest lots of points into them. And then the second part of that is a kind of a skill tree built into the skills themselves. So each of them has a branching path that you can focus into. And then we're hoping that kind of combining all three of these things will lead to a large variety of play styles.
So talk to me about kind of, I ask every developer this, it's a very broad question, I know, but you pour so much time into a game, you put so much emphasis on everything, but can you narrow down anything that you really lean into as a part of the game you really love, like character, a part of the map, story, whatever it may be? I mean, every developer usually locks in on one thing specifically, but can you kind of narrow it down to something?
For me, maybe I'm a bit biased because I worked very closely on these, but it's probably the boss fights. I think it's been awesome to kind of watch them go from what is paper design at one point to then an early version after a programmer implements all the logic. And then shortly after some balancing and lots of play testing, they kind of get to pass to the artists. And then that's where they really become this visually awesome thing. And it's a completely different experience when you see it all pieced together little bit by bit.
Yeah, the boss fight in the demo was definitely, I enjoyed it a lot. It was very reminiscent of kind of your old school 2D platformer boss fights, and it was really nice to see that. Kind of looking at that though, I know I didn't write this question down, so I'm sorry if I'm blindsiding you with it, but just coming off of the demo and all of the people playing it, I know a lot of people were live streaming all the game demos and things of that nature. Were there any things that you kind of noticed that needed to be tweaked within the game from that?
I think part of it was almost learning that we're on the right track in certain aspects. Originally, in our earlier builds, I think the difficulty in the earlier levels was a bit harder than what we had originally intended. And through some modifications, I think we were able to change that. And then the balance gets a little bit harder as you get through the game now. So that's been kind of nice to confirm our decision. As for changes we'd like to make, it really depends on whether we will go through with additional updates in the future. I think there's definitely always you can watch someone new play the game and there's something in there that you'd really like to edit. So there's been a couple of common complaints that we've gotten in our Discord that I'd certainly like to address in the future.
Okay, and just kind of going off that, give me an idea of just the different levels. I know you touched on how it gets a little bit different or more difficult as you go, but kind of how many different levels are within this game and how different is each level within their design structure? And just kind of another question branching even further off that, just the story within the game. How long can players really expect it to be?
So our game is divided into basically 4 different visual environments. And within those 4 environments, you have, not counting the tutorial stuff, it's about 12 levels containing about 10 boss fights total. To complete all of that, it'll take roughly 8 to 10 hours for, I think, an average player. We've had much shorter times internally, but those are definitely outliers of, speed runs from people who are very familiar with the game.
Okay. And finally, just kind of to wrap things up, what platforms is it coming out on? And past that, once you get past release, do you have anything planned, whether it's DLC, season content? Do you guys potentially even have Foregone 2, I don't know, or another game on the works?
So we are actually out on the Epic Game Store, Switch, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One. The Steam launch is March 1st, and that will come with a DLC update pushed to kind of all the platforms. This will provide some new side content, including 12 new missions, another way to customize your equipment, and a boss battle that kind of escalates through repeat encounters as you encounter that boss throughout the new content.
Okay. And then is there anything else you wanted to touch on, whether it's gameplay mechanics or just different parts of the game that players should know about before we wrap things up?
Big one for me is just our Discord. The demo's been awesome because we've had people popping in there and kind of just giving feedback. And I read every single comment in there and try to respond to as many of those as I can. Best way to get feedback to the game is just to reach out on Discord. Okay.
One final question that I didn't think about beforehand that's kind of coming to mind right now. With all the different weapons within the game, with all the, you have guns and swords and long range versus short range. How much can you lean into kind of customizing a certain play style with terms of, I know you were touching on the skills trees and you kind of upgrade within the different skills you have, but how much can you lean into that as you play, and how much does that affect the game as a whole?
In terms of playstyle, you can't strictly focus on, say, I want to just deal ranged damage. Mm-hmm. We purposely balanced it so that that's not really an option. Your melee weapon and your ranged weapon are kind of always your primary way of dealing damage, but there are plenty of ways that you can customize how much your skills contribute to all of that damage. As you get further along, you'll acquire significantly more powerful skills or significantly more powerful modifiers to your skills. And those will recharge a lot quicker, which means they'll become more of a primary use rather than something that's secondary for dealing damage.
Gotcha. Okay. And I guess the very last thing I would ask you is there any, I guess, Easter eggs in the game that players should know about? Things that are kind of hidden out of sight that you should look for?
There are actually a lot of little Easter eggs that our art team snuck in there as they were dressing the levels. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I'd really want to reveal them. There's some great odes to other games we do like.
Gotcha.
So a lot of them, I will mention, a lot of them require panning the camera in a way. So if you hit like a faraway corner and then you pan the camera a bit further than your character can actually move, you might discover some secrets.
Okay, noted. Gotcha. Perfect. That's everything I had.
Now, the demo for Foregone is actually still on Steam if you would like to check it out. Now, it was a great interview. We covered a lot of different great things. There was a lot of intriguing topics and intriguing things about this game in general, and I definitely recommend that anybody who hasn't checked it out, check it out. I am Nick Lanner, and I will see you next time. Take it easy.